Hi patrons! So today I wanted to record a video, just a bonus video for the month, which was requested by Patricia, and she wanted to know if I could talk or demo how I choose a colour palette or a colour combination. So I've got my sketchbooks here. I'm bookmarked a few with colour palettes that I want to talk about, and I've also got my no pressure sketchbook for me to do some swatches with some of my favourite colours. So most of the time I gravitate towards the colours that I know I really enjoy, and I know I like them because the pencils are really short. So if I get these Luminance, you can see compared to a full-size one, this one, you can see I've used it a lot. I've obviously sharpened them often, and these colours generally are greens and neutrals. Those are my go-tos, and I find that's mostly because I love to draw nature and landscapes. So depending on what you love to draw will obviously influence your colour palette, but it also doesn't have to. So most of the time with my references for landscapes and things, I tend to stick to what is real. I tend to stick to a lot of the neutrals, browns and greens, but these rules obviously don't have to apply. I've got an example here in my big A4 sketchbook where I deliberately changed the colours to try and do something a bit different to normal. So this is my usuals with the greens and the blue skies, and then this one was a landscape where I completely changed the colours. I've still got the greens, but they're a bit more neon. I don't know if it will pick up on camera, but it's a lot brighter. And I've obviously got these oranges and then the purples. So you don't have to stick to the usual colours, but I tend to because that's my comfort zone. I knew that the orange purpley blues would work. I knew that would work well. I don't often think about the colour wheel when I'm creating. I tend to just use the reference and go from there. But it is definitely something that is useful if you are wanting to learn about colour theory and things. So I know that orange often goes well with blue, so it works well with the purple as well. And they're not far off, but green and purple goes nicely, and that's something that I did in my more recent work when I was using purples a lot more. So that's not a colour I used to use a lot. But you can see the muted greens and the sort of berry coloured purples and pinks work really nicely. I really enjoy using this colour border at the moment. So basically I want to say that the rules aren't set in stone. You can definitely experiment and try new things. But one of the things that I find when I'm choosing colour palettes, and let me open up a spread, and you can really see it in these, I've got this little one as well, these colours here, especially with the greens. And I know Emma Carlisle talks a lot about this as well, and that is you've got the light, the mid-tone and the dark green, and they pair really nicely together. And I obviously use them a lot in my work, so I'm going to share a lot of my favourite colours. So this is your enabling warning that I know whenever I watch videos like this, I'm always tempted to buy more, and I always put things on my wish list. But you can see here, if you're picking a green, or you want to do a painting or a drawing that's very green heavy, you don't want to go with all the same tones. So you can see I've got my light, medium and dark here, but if I was just to go with all mid-tones, I don't think it wouldn't have the same contrast. So even though these are different shades, this one's a bit lighter, but you can see here it doesn't have the same sort of contrast that these do, and I tend to use this as the base and then I'll go over it with the dark. Whereas if I was doing this as the base, I can't then really go over it with these. You can't see it. It's good for blending, and you can definitely use all of these, but for details you don't get the same contrast there that you do with this. And even if I added in the middle colour there, you can see the different tones. Whereas this one, you really can't see it. So tone is definitely something that is important with colour palettes. And when I'm choosing a limited colour palette spread, so if I find one in here, so this one, I had quite a few midtones. I had the like the greens, and then lighter tones I had a beige, a pink and a grey, but what pulled it all together and what I needed for this spread was the navy blue, and that was my dark tone, and that was really important for the line work and the contrast. So you don't have to pick a black or a really dark brown or dark green. You can pick other colours, like a dark purple or even a dark red. I really enjoy this one, which is Burnt Ochre 77, and that works really nicely. It is more mid-tone, but when you pair it with like this Burnt Ochre 10%, which is a pairing I often do, you can see that's a lot darker. And again with, this one's Brown Ochre 10%, this one's Burnt Ochre 10%. It needs to have this one to pull in for all the contrast and all the details. And that's what I did here. So one of my favourite colour combinations that I was really into a few months back is the pink. So this is the Pastel Red 381 in Ecoline. But just pink and navy is a really nice colour combo. So I could go darker than this navy here, but I really love that combination. And I only found that by experimenting, so I always recommend that. And if you are doing timed spreads, or like, drawing cities, this is a really good way to test it out. I really enjoy limited colour palettes, but I do tend to get a bit carried away. And like, sometimes I pick too many. This was a really quick 5-minute panel one, but you can see again, I've gone with my favourite colours. So this is my favourite blue. It's the light cobalt blue. These are the Luminance coloured pencils. This is 631. But I can pair this with a lot of things and it works really well for the sky. So my usual colour palette would always involve like a blue sky, and then generally there's like grass, so I'd go for this one, which is the olive yellow 015. If I'm being like really careful and doing a limited colour palette spread, then I'd get my dark green for like trees, and that's 719. Dark Thalocyanine green. I don't know how many maybe I'll pick 5. Then I'll probably go for a neutral, so the Brown Ochre, which is good for pathways. And then to pair that one with a darker colour, I pick the Burnt Ochre 77. So you can see there, these are my neutrals, and then these are my dark tones. So this would be working on top. This would be for like the bushes and the foliage, and this would be for like drawing the stones or the little details that I like to add on top, or even like the tree trunks and things. And then this is the sky. Because there tends not to be much detail in the sky, I tend to just use that on its own. But if I was to do the same with these two, then I would pick the navy or darker blue, and that would be my colour palette. Sorry, I was on the wonk there. But that would be my colour palette. So I think pairing things with a darker tone tends to work really nicely. Obviously it depends what you're drawing, but that tends to be how I create my colour palettes. So you can see here that this is a really good example. Those are basically these colours except for the dark blue, and instead of a dark blue I've picked this sort of like dark aubergine colour. This was my dark tone for this neutrals, so I've got these lighter tones, and then that's my dark tone for that. And I've got my light blue for the sky, and then my mid-tones of the greens, and that really dark Thalocyanine green for the details, so like the grass here in the front. And that works really nicely because you've got the different tones there. So this is like my go-to colour palette and my favourite shades. This is a really good example, I thought, of showing you where I don't really have the dark tones. You can see it is quite washed out, but if you are going for that muted look, it works really nicely. It feels quite serene and calm. And I do have the dark greens, and I've obviously got the details with the black. But you can see that generally this is quite a washed out, very toned back spread, and that's because I don't have the contrast there from the different tones. This is mostly all lighter tones. I'd say it's mostly all of this, with even like the light blue sky and the light green. And the only thing that adds in the contrast is the darker green. This one again is a good one to show off my favourite colours. I've obviously got the light greens. This is with the Nia colours, so I've got the dark green Nia colour, the olive one, and then this sort of red shade, but it's also paired with the navy blue, which works nicely. So I definitely have colours that I prefer, and I think as you create more and more, you'll see which ones you prefer as well. This one I picked out because it has so many colours, you can see here, but it doesn't mean it doesn't work. So I wanted to show this as well, because you don't have to pick a limited colour palette spread. You can pick all of the colours, but like if I show you my Derwent Inktense pencils, if I was to create an illustration with all of these, it would be quite daunting, and I'm sure it would work, but I think it helps to start with like the mid, the light and the dark tone. So I would pick like a dark green, light green, and then a mid green, rather than doing all million shades of green. In here I've got so many shades of blue, which I wouldn't need for one illustration. So I've got navy blue, deep indigo, iron blue, deep blue, and sea blue, and they're basically all the same sort of tone. This one's probably the darkest. It might be hard to show in the light, but if I was picking a colour palette or creating an illustration, I would pick one first, and then if I am adding texture or details over the top, then maybe I'll go for the darker one. But I would say it can get overwhelming with colour, so I think that's a really good way to approach things. Let me just check my other sketchbook and see which ones I wanted to show you in here. So this is a really good example. This is one that I did on our live stream actually. I think it was September's live stream, and this is with some brighter colours of my usual shades. So I've still got my comfort zone of blue and green, but I've added in the red barns. So if you stick with your normal colour palettes, this is a really good way to try new things. You can always tell in my Nia colour set which ones I don't use often because they're still sharp, and reds and bright pinks are often the ones that are the sharpest. But it's a really nice way to start introducing other colours, and I still think it works really nicely. This is a good example of the pink I really like with the burnt ochre 10% again for the line work. I could have gone darker again, but I think it works well with the white page. And then obviously the Tombow, which is basically my version of the olive yellow but in pen form. That's what I've used here for the trees, and gone over the top with the really dark green, which is that dark Thylacine green. So it works with like brush pens and gouache. It's the same principle. This is another one where I was out of my comfort zone. This was for the October live stream. I often don't use yellow, but you can see again I brought in the darker burnt ochre for the details over the top of that. So it's just kind of pairing these colours with a darker shade, and you can go lighter as well for shading, and if you are like really detailed with the illustrations, then that works as well. This palette, you can see here, this was a really minimal 4-colour palette spread, which is a lot less than I usually go for, and it does look quite washed out. I think looking back at this, I could have done with a really dark blue, maybe even like this deep indigo, just to bring it out a bit. Like certainly for this car, I think it would have worked because this obviously blends in really a lot with the pink below. But it depends what kind of feeling you're going for. If you're going for a soft illustration, then you would have less of that contrast. And then the last one I want to show you is one of my most recent paintings, which was this 20-minute spread using Google Maps. And again, this is very much my colour palette, but I'm starting to introduce that sort of aubergine purple shade a bit more, and I'm using that as one of my contrasts for like details and things. and pairing that with this sort of dusky pink shade, which isn't there in there much, but it is a little bit, and I think that really makes it feel a lot warmer. And then obviously my usual like browns and greens, and then the blue I really like. And this was done with gouache and then paired with those pencils. So I'm just going to go through some of these colours. So in terms of, I definitely have colours that I love, and I've got them in different versions. So for Tombows, I've got my version of that light cobalt blue, which is the 451. And the green, which is running out, that's the 126. And then the beige, which is the 942. So you can really see my preferred colour palette in this page. I've got the neutrals, the greens and the blues. And I also really like this shade, which is the 728 from Ecoline. That's just a really nice neutral grey, but it's quite a warm grey, so I like that one. And then obviously I've got the pink, which I really liked, which is up there. That's the 381. And then all my little pencils, which tell me which ones are my favourite luminance, and that matches all of these. So I definitely think with colour palettes I go for what I know, but I don't think that's a bad thing, because then you can pair other things with it, like with the Red Barns, and it obviously depends on what you're drawing and painting. This here is an example of a colour palette I did before Folktale Week, which is obviously very different to my usual work because it was very blue and purple heavy. So what I did for that was I just scribbled out lots of these. These are mostly Derwent Inktense, and I saw which ones I wanted. I knew I wanted a navy, so these are all the blues. I didn't need all of these, so I didn't take them with me through to the final palette, but it's really handy to just swatch things out. I recommend doing a page in your sketchbook which is all swatches. I don't know if it's in this one. So I do recommend doing a swatch page like this, just to see all the colours that you do have, and then you can pair things together. I think my collection's definitely grown from here, but it's really helpful to see, and it makes a really nice spread as it is. But you can definitely see I love my greens. So I hope that was helpful. I don't often think about colour because I do go for my usuals, so I hope this was a useful video for you. I don't often think about colour. I tend to work with what's in front of me, but I do generally warm things up, and I do use my comfort zone of materials. If there's any other questions about colour or anything that I've missed in this video, or you want something more specific, please do pop them in the comments. I really hope this video was interesting, and I will see you soon with a new post. Thank you for watching, and I'll speak to you all really soon. See you later.